Entrepreneurship
on 702.
Andisa Ramavhunga is Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting Group. Joins me this evening. He's here with me in studio. Andisa, thank you so much for joining us, my brother. Thank you, as always, for coming into studio at this time of the evening. I appreciate it. Business versus entrepreneurship. What's the difference?
Thank you, Aubrey, and good evening to your listeners. I think this is a topic that emanates from our last conversation. I've been getting a lot of flack around why am I saying businessmen are not entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs are not businessmen. And I think people...
Is that what you say?
People take what from conversations, what they deduct.
They will, yeah?
They will be. And it's not for us to diffuse or disagree with them. And you would realize that my stance from this show is not to disagree. I only disagree when I think there's a point of disagreement. Because the concepts that we discuss, you and I, are not an exact science. I think that's what we always say. They're more a guideline of what it will take for us to build legacy organizations. I think that's where we departed as well, because we're not about how do you play small in a small pond, but it's about how do you take a concept that's very small, put it in a big pond, and take on the best and become the best, right? Those are concepts that we think about. And last time you and I spoke, there was a huge concept around, I think when we started, around what a businessman and an entrepreneur and what is the difference. And I think I was the first to point out to you as well, Aubrey, to say that the question is not so much what is the difference between a businessman and an entrepreneur, but is to point out what stage of an organization needs which type of skill set. Because for me, it makes no sense of trying to brag about who's the best or who. For me, it's about progress, it's about output, it's about effectiveness. That says at some point you need an entrepreneur, at some point you need a businessman. And you need to realize when you need a businessman or not. And that's why we started discussing issues around scaling.
Right.
And I guess that was my point of departure. But I thought it was important for us to come back, because for me, and I got a lot of flack, funny enough, from business people. And not so much entrepreneurship.
I'm excited that they're listening, so that's good. Yeah.
And it's I guess the point of pain from them was more around maybe we not recognizing their value. And for me, it's not to say, by the way, there's a distinct, right? For me, obviously, ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur that's got business skills, you're a businessman, that's the ultimate entrepreneur.
Sure.
But I can take back, and that's when you will realize why most founders, by the way, would get ousted of the organization they founded, is because they lack the pedigree to take the organization to the next step. And this is when you need a business person.
Right.
Because there it's less about strategy and more about operating the strategy. And I need to choose my words carefully now, because I've got friends in places, and I don't want to limit my job opportunities. I must be careful where my bread is buttered. But for me, an entrepreneur is very simple, right? And I think we've mentioned the issues of strategy, because you can't separate strategy from entrepreneurship. Because strategy, as we've defined it, is about how do you create and capture value. And a lot of that has to do with being aggressive, spotting opportunities. And I would even argue, because I'm now schooled in principles and frameworks around strategy, that a lot of good entrepreneurs, and now I'm mentioning the pedigree of the likes of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, I would even argue in the South African context, the likes of Bomaponya and Bose Motswenyane, they've ticked a lot of boxes in their mind, and this is their theory we are trying to bring. And I would argue somewhat not successful, because I still, a lot of people think we are too academic, and part of the challenge you and I have is how do we
make it relatable?
Yeah. How do we bring resonance around this? So you'll quickly foresee that entrepreneurs are less about data and are more about intuition. And that's a very big thing. But that intuition is not baseless, because they first start with an idea. And I would even argue an idea is almost minimizing what they have. It's not even an idea. They've spotted a problem in the environment, and they think they have a solution to bring to solve that problem, and that's why an idea comes. And you'll quickly realize there that they've quickly realized one, who they are solving the problem for, who was their target market, and what value proposition, this stuff, because it's more than just a product, right? It's a lot of other things. There's cost consideration, there's product quality consideration, there's points of differentiation around the product itself, which comes to service that are customized or are wrapping the product. I mean, I think we've had a whole conversation around a product vis-a-vis a value proposition, but they've at least crafted the value proposition to meet the market segment that they're willing to serve. But more importantly, they know how to win. In that, they say, I have this, but for me to win, because they understand that there are other people who have the same thing, but somehow they understand what it will take to win. And I say this, it's less based on data and more on intuition, because entrepreneurs naturally are hungry for knowledge, and they go out with this thing that's called hypothesis, and I don't know what's the right lingo that we can use for hypothesis for us.
Some sort of a basic theory.
Yeah, basic theory. That's saying, good, I need to test that theory and come back and learn from it, and quickly come back and rejig what I have. And when I say rejig, come back and say, is this the value proposition that the people want? And if it is, what is missing for me to fully capture the market? And they come back and plug it in. So they quickly do that. And you'll quickly realize that that's a very uncomfortable space to be in, because there's a whole lot of unknowns.
Yes.
And the power of it is based on going out and reaching out to the market and being vulnerable to the market and learning as much as you can and coming back. And by the way, allowing for, and I use this phrase very often, and I'm realizing for myself, is actually a very powerful phrase that says, fail fast, fail forward. Right. A lot of entrepreneurs have that. And it's a very, this gung-ho, and they are willing to come back with the tail back and between their legs, and it didn't work, but let me come out and see. But you'll see that a lot of what they do, whether they know it or not, is grounded in a lot of strategy, because it's about creating value and it's about capturing that value. That's what entrepreneurs do, and they do it very well. And you'll quickly realize that very few organizations have mastered the art of entrepreneurship, and it's a function of where the organization. They will come to talk about business people and what they do, or at least the notion of what I call a businessman. So you'll realize that type of an individual and that type of an organization obviously is very high risk, and it's best serves in environments that are not too determined. They don't have a lot of prescripts and rules, because if you have a lot of prescripts, it will stifle it. That's entrepreneurship for me. It's very gung-ho, go to the market, understand the consumer, and you know what you need to do, which is very different from what I would say business people do.
So give me a call, 011-883-0702. We're asking a fundamental question that says, what is the difference between an entrepreneur and a business person? Yeah. I'm not asking the question that says, what is an entrepreneur? I'm asking the question, what is an entrepreneur in the context of a business person? And I want to remind you of a conversation, of the last conversation we had, because really this was a tracing of your journey in business. And you spoke about a phase in your business where you and your partners were very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Right? And then at a certain point in time, you decided to corporatize. And that's when I started asking questions around scaling. What is that all about? So I'm getting the sense that you're saying to me that entrepreneurship is an attitude almost.
Yeah.
It is an approach to business at a certain phase of that business, at a certain phase of that idea. It is a particular attitude, it's a particular approach that is less data-driven and more intuition-driven.
Yeah.
And that is because of the many unknowns that exist. But it appears to me that once a business grows to a certain level, there are far more predictabilities, far more knowns that need to be managed in a particular way. Because somebody might think that we are saying that an entrepreneur is less professional than a business person. That's not what we're saying, right?
You're raising very good question. I don't want to say they are less professional.
Yes.
But they have less rules.
Right.
I guess that's a subtle, because I mean, what is professionalism at the end of the day? I mean, a policeman is professional because it's about doing the same things over and over again without compromising on the quality. I guess that would professionalism would be. And if you take that to an entrepreneurship space, it still exists, because an entrepreneur must be curious, must be talking to customers. They must be learning and coming back, but they need to also stick. And that's why I don't want to say they're not professional.
Right.
I think they are professional, but with less rigor of the rules. And maybe let me even push it for you, or Aubrey, and say, and we've had this conversation with you and I that says, what are actually entrepreneurs paid for, right? A lot of people will quickly say it's hard work, and and I always say this hard work thing is overrated, and overrated not because I'm saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying that hard work is what I call an order qualifier. You have to do it to be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily the thing that makes you win. If you don't do it, you're not in the game. You won't even consider even thinking about winning, right?
Yeah.
But you have to do it to be in the game. So if all of us are now working hard, who then gets remunerated for the hard work? It's not the hardest worker, by the way. It's the decisions that we make with our hard work.
Mm.
And this is where it differentiates. I would.
You got to say that to me again. You got to say that to me again, because I want to take that slowly. It's not the hard.
It's not the work that you paid for.
Yep.
It's the decisions that you make. In fact, I would even argue it's the quality of the decisions that you make. That's why you would get, by the way, people who are sitting in corporates at top heads. I don't want to sound very controversial, because I read something which was very profound that says, if hard work was the pinnacle of success, black rural women would be the most compensated.
Absolutely.
I don't think they will ever find an example in the world
hard-working people. Sure.
Yeah, but this is not what the world remunerates. The world remunerates decision making, and that's why the top honchos in big business, they're not paid for hard work. They're paid for
the quality of the decisions that they make.
Obviously, about the work. And I did say that, and I don't want people to leave here and thinking hard work is overrated. I was the first to say that if you don't work hard, you're not in the game.
Sure.
You're not even a starter. But once you start working hard, you must understand that that's not what will make you win.
Right.
It's just a necessarily qualifier order of getting you into the game. But what will make you win is the quality of the decisions you make, and that's what you get paid for.
So, Thabo Khumalo on Twitter says, good evening, Aubrey. Can we separate entrepreneurs from engineers? Is every business a brainchild of an entrepreneur, or a business can come to existence without the skills of an entrepreneur? How do you respond?
Yeah, and I love that question because it ends where we, or at least it begins where we ended the last time. And part of the reason why I wanted us to have this conversation, we had this thing around self-employment, right? Because it's a lot of what engineers, if you are in an engineering field and you are self-employed. And if you are a doctor and you are providing service, you are self-employed. It's not necessarily entrepreneurship. I think we at least the last conversation, I think we spoke about that, but I don't think we did justice. But what sets the difference between an entrepreneur, let's take and I love the engineering thing that says you've got a technical skill, and it's about engineering, and you can do it and you can find customers and you can sustain your livelihood out of it. The next question then becomes, can I scale this thing? Because this is now where entrepreneurship comes through. Is to say, can I grow this thing? Because it's much bigger than just my skill set, right? Because you can always teach skill. You can always find another engineer. You can always employ another engineer. But can you have hundreds of them going at the same rate? That allows for you to at least build an organization. And I would argue that your technical skills won't allow you to do that. Yeah, it will allow you to vet the quality of the work that they do, blah, blah, blah. But it won't necessarily lead you to scaling a business. There's other things that come out of that. And this is now the strategic thinking that comes of that. And it's a concept of what I call acumen. Because you need to have insights around industry, insights around clients, insights around the organization itself that you need to at least have in your foresight. But you need to have something I call as well very good in resource allocation. And you'll understand this has nothing to do now with engineering. It's about, can you understand what are the priorities within an organization and be able to rejig your resources, whether it's in marketing or it's in product development or it's in sales. You need to be able to come very quickly to say, okay, we have got all these resources, whether be it cash or people, and you then are able to allocate them to the right places where they are needed for the business of where at the stage that it's at, right? And then the next thing that says, can you action what you say you're gonna do? If you're saying, okay, I've realized that there's my insights, which is acumen, says that there's engineering skills that are required in tuba. And your resource allocation says, I need to build an office there and staff it with necessary people. And then can I action it? Which is, and this is where, by the way, businessmen come in very handy. It's about project planning, right? Getting the right people, getting the right systems, getting the right organization, getting the right incentives, and make a business out of it. But those things are useless if you don't have the entrepreneurship. Okay, maybe useless they are very limited in terms of effectiveness. If you do not have the initial entrepreneurial approach, they won't happen unless you have that entrepreneurial approach.
Okay, so I got to tell you that I'm now at a place where I'm hearing self-employed, entrepreneurship, and business.
Yeah.
And all of those seem to be stages
of a business, yes.
Of a business. But the interesting question by Mtunga here, Thabo, says, do all businesses have to be initiated by an entrepreneur? In other words, is it a necessary condition for a business to occur, to exist, that an entrepreneur would have had to conceive of the idea? Or does a business begin as a result of a particular skill that somebody like an engineer has? Guy who is a panel beater. His car broke down. In fact, my colleague Bongani Bingo was speaking to somebody this morning who runs a business where they hire out these bladders, these aqua bladders, I think. I was listening to him in the morning. If your pool needs to be fixed or whatever the case may be, they take the water and pump it into this big bladder, and then the pool gets fixed, and then they return the water into your pool. And how he started that business is because his pool broke down or was leaking, and he had to remove the water. So it appears to me that in that instance, it wasn't an entrepreneurial moment of brilliance. It was by necessity. Now, is that entrepreneurial? Is it not?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question, and I think through our conversations, I've tried to answer it. So it is entrepreneurship, if I was to answer it bluntly.
Yeah.
Right, but realize what type of entrepreneurship it is. If that guy you're talking about does that day in, day out for the next 30 years and is able to provide for his family, that's self-employment.
Right.
But remember the type of entrepreneurship we're talking about here. We're talking about someone who's able to take that type of an idea and scale it into a corporate, into a business that that's able to absorb many employment opportunities, is able to create multiple revenue streams through the value chain. I'm talking about creating another conglomerate that will go list. You'll understand that that's different chalk and cheese. I would even argue that, and they've got this in the MBA lingo, they call it the mamas and papas shop. So
Yes.
if you're creating a mamas and papas shop, I guess that's an acceptable type of entrepreneurship, right? But for the one that you and I are talking about, which is about development, it's about scaling, it's about creating opportunities for other people. It's about creating value for yourself and your shareholders. It's about creating value for legacy, the community and legacy and so forth. I would argue for that, you need both the entrepreneur and hopefully that entrepreneur is a business person as well. If that entrepreneur is not a business person, he needs to get then into partnerships with other things that we've spoken about with business people. And let me maybe leech on into, at least in my mind, what I term a business person. It's not to say they're necessarily less than an entrepreneur, because they are the guys who are able to take the concept or the idea in its infancy and are able to build an organization out of it. A lot of people think organizations, and I don't want to say entrepreneur, it's this call it sexy thing around strategy, around thinking about clients. But there is the necessary work that needs to be done.
Sure.
The work that says, let me structure this thing. Let me hire the people. Let me have the necessary processes. By the way, when I say let me have them, I'm saying let's build them. Let's put in an incentive structure, blah, blah, and all those things. And not only that, but let me check that everything works according to that plan that we've put in. That's a mammoth task. And this is where a business, I call them operators, or at least in my world, business people. And you find a lot of them in organizations because they are about keeping systems working. And I don't talk about systems in an IT manner, but in an organizational manner, because systems have got a lot of other things. They've got processes, they've got people, they've got organizations, they've got incentives, they've got culture, and all those things that you need to put together and make sure that it works. In fact, a lot of CEOs, I'd argue, in a corporate environment, that's what they do. People would argue that there's strategy involved in there, and we can get into a philosophical debate around is what they are doing strategy or is it strategic planning? And I want to diffuse between the two. And I would always argue that strategy is the domain of entrepreneurs, and not to say business people do not have that capability. They are.
But you're saying that business people operationalize strategy.
They make things happen.
Right.
They meet KPIs, they meet strategic objectives, but you'll find they thrive in an area. And that's why I'm saying let's split the business into three. There's the foundational phase where entrepreneurship plays a big role. There's then the operationalization where you are building the necessary infrastructure, the part that we call scaling. This is about determining what are the processes, what are the people that need to go, what are the systems, and let's make sure they happen and build the necessary intestines. And then there are operators who will make sure that those things work in an organization. Is the incentive working? Is the recruitment process working? Are we having the right people? Are we having the right outputs in terms of productions of products? Do they meet the right quality? Am I talking to clients and am I getting that feedback? That's not to say necessarily those will be three different people. It could be the same person.
Yeah, sure.
But you'll find that it's three different skill sets.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the same person. That's why you find an organization will have a life curve, and obviously, when it starts, an entrepreneur plays a very great deal, and you need somewhat of a product/project manager in between to make things, to build things. And in the last will be then the operator, and what you assign to them, whether you call them business people or entrepreneurs or supporters of a venture. I'm not too married to what you assign, but at least understand that these are the skill sets that are required in a journey of a business.
You've got lots of calls coming through, but I want to read you some of the messages that have come through as people sort of mull over some of these concepts that we're dealing with. Remember, Andisa Ramavhunga and I are talking about the entrepreneur and the business person. And we can get bogged down in labels. We can.
Yeah.
But really the conversation is to try and discriminate between functions in the evolution of an organization. That's really what we're trying to do here. And I love what you've just said now, that sometimes different skills may reside in the same person, but those different skills are required at a different phase of an organization.
Yeah.
And often those different skills reside in different people.
Yeah.
But they may reside in the same person.
Yeah. It's possible.
And you've said earlier that we need to understand that there is the idea that becomes a value proposition to a market. A market that has a particular challenge or a problem that the conceiver of the solution, the entrepreneur, then goes into that market to try and monetize the solving of the problem. That's the entrepreneur. And he has very little data. So he works on a lot of intuition. And that's why a lot of people tend to think that entrepreneurs are not professional. But for that reality, for the reality of a brand new idea, a problem that needs to be solved, that has never been solved before, you need somebody that is pretty gung-ho, I think was the word that you used. Somebody that's adventurous. And sometimes when we look at that person through the spectacles of a corporatized sort of in space, he may not look very professional. But he can't be professional in that sense because he's doing something completely brand new. I know that we are still going to talk about that businessman, that business person. But more and more, as I listen to you speak, it sounds to me like the business person is the person who then operationalizes the strategy. Makes that, and it can be the same person, but often it's not. I want to read you some of the messages that are coming through, and then we're going to go to the lines. Now I've lost. Okay. Dos Santos says, evening, Aubrey. Please ask your guest for me that I'm so passionate about football. So much that I'm considering venturing into it professionally. My vision towards the future of our football development, what advice can he give me entrepreneurially, says Dos Santos. Yeah? So there's a passion there. And then somebody says, Opas says, evening, Bra Ops. I believe entrepreneurs can initiate an idea into an established institution, whereas a businessman is resources oriented, says Opas. Nice one. Is it possible for a corporatized business, a business that has now reached the the stage of being a corporate to still have entrepreneurial tendencies? I want you to think about that. Can a business that has reached the level of being a corporate, right, with all of those systems, with all of those predictabilities, with all of those, can it still have that gung-ho, that adventurous kind of spirit about it? Or is it doomed to systems, suits, and meetings? I want to hear your thoughts about that. But lots of calls coming through on 011-883-0702. Andisa Ramavhunga is my guest. We're talking about business. We're talking about entrepreneurship. We've also thrown in there the issue of the self-employed individual. And I'm hoping that you can join us in this conversation. Let me go straight to the lines. Joshua is in Kempton Park. Good evening to you, Joshua.
Good evening, Bra Ops.
Sure, go ahead, Joshua.
And the guest.
Sure.
I'd like to explain that is the self-employed and the businessman.
Yeah.
The businessman is the person who runs the business, who comes with ideas, all right?
Yeah.
And the entrepreneur is the one who's gone to the university level, all right? The person who goes to the university level is the one who's giving the guidance to the business person who comes with an idea, because he does have a knowledge. For example, an accountant, all right? Since I'm an accountant, and you help the business people, because the business people, they come with ideas only to find that they do their own things, but only to find that their finances are in tatters.
Yeah.
They don't know how to run their own business. So you need to come in and advise them how to run their business professionally.
Do you run your own practice, Joshua?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So
I do.
In many ways, are you a businessman or an entrepreneur?
Both.
Yeah.
As an accountant, because as an accountant, you become both. You look for businesses, at the same time you come with ideas.
Yeah.
Because you've been exposed to different types of businesses. You know exactly how they operate. Businesses, how they operate. Because you've been long in the field. You know exactly which business are profitable, which are not profitable. You are able to explain to the people, to the business owners, because you are self-employed.
Yeah.
The one who's coming with ideas, you show him the guidelines.
Yeah.
You show him how to do things correctly, because you find that there are a lot of people who are in the businesses and they've got ideas, good ideas, but they can't implement the internal controls. They can't implement what needs to be done.
Joshua, I hear you, my brother. Let me stop you there, but thank you very much for your contribution. Let me take a call from Thabo in Mainland. Please, I need to get Piri. I saw Piri was on the line. Piri, please come back. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. Thabo, good evening to you.
Entrepreneurs are needs addressers.
Right.
That's my starting point. Entrepreneurs are business people. They are self-employed. They create self-employment. They are self-employed. And then business people seek opportunities to invest the money in entrepreneurs, which means the entrepreneurs create the needs. They identify the needs in the public. Mm-hmm. And then from there, when the needs is identified, they might not have money to can finance the needs. So that's where the businessman comes in, invests the money to fulfill the needs. A typical example, Bra Obza, is a garden team. Mm. I remember there was this white man that was just coming from a prison. Mm. He realized that, I think you know what I'm talking about.
It used to be gardeners.
When we were growing. Yeah, garden workers, yes. Yeah. So when he was coming from prison, he said to me, Max, are you still working on this, my brother-in-law? I said, yes. He said, now, look at me. I went for 19 years and then I'm now an entrepreneur. I'm going to be rich and watch the space. And definitely he didn't have anything. but he looked for people that can trust him and give him the apparatus to work. And he started this guiding team. And then he was so successful. So that is he identified the needs from the public of people that actually wanted their garden to be cleaned, and then he addressed that needs by forming the company. So if we can in South Africa raise more people that can look at opportunities, and our government invest in that, definitely will go everywhere. Lastly, if you look at Dr. Sam Montonyan, that's what he used to do. That's what he used to do. He was supporting people that were having ideas and everything like that. And Babangata, but who used to be there, they were supporting people that comes with ideas. So entrepreneurs are business people, but business people are not entrepreneurs.
All right, Thabo, let me leave it there. Much appreciated. Yeah. Government must. That one, it's an issue. But we'll talk about that at a certain point in time. Good evening, Bra Obs and Mr. Ramavhunga. This is such an interesting topic. A few questions. Can entrepreneurship be learned at an institution? And if yes, are the businessmen who enroll for entrepreneurial courses with a purpose to obviously uplift their businesses or to sway their businesses in a certain direction? Because I 100% certain that entrepreneurs do not go to courses to uplift their business skills. And a similar question coming from somebody who calls me Aubrey. He says, good evening, Aubrey. Can you ask the gentleman, are entrepreneurs born or made? Have a wonderful evening, says this person. Venant says, a corporate is doomed to suits, like you say. You've heard some of the thoughts. How do you respond?
Yeah, I think let me start with this. Can entrepreneurs be made? Unfortunately, entrepreneurship is not like it's not a craft. And when I say craft, it's not about being a shoemaker or being an accountant, right, or being a doctor, because those things you can go to varsity, you would learn about them. So they have to do a lot with, I guess, interests. So if you were to ask me bluntly, is there a made entrepreneur? There's no such thing. What you and I are trying to do with this series of these conversations is trying to convert people into entrepreneurs, at least whetting their appetite enough. But entrepreneurship is a journey. It's not, I have a 3-year degree. I think another caller, can you just go into an institution and you can learn all the MBAs you learn, or you can go and get a BSc or BCom in entrepreneurship. But that would not necessarily turn you into entrepreneurship. Not to say that those wasted. You learn a lot of valuable skills. Yeah. I guess a lot of these tick boxes we are teaching you about strategy, about organizational design, about leadership and culture. You learn a lot of them. But what really makes an entrepreneur is when you start practicing a lot of these things. And you'll realize very soon that a lot of people who practice a lot of these things are not necessarily from an entrepreneurship academic background. They just are normal people like you and I. They just see a need in the market and they need to develop as entrepreneurs through that journey. So I do not believe or subscribe to the notion that entrepreneurs you are born. I think every one of us has got a bit of entrepreneurship.
We become
it.
Right. Okay.
One thing I think we must not lose sight is that there is no point in I guess in your journey that you say I'm an entrepreneur. It's just one of those long life things. You just have to go through it. Yeah, of course there are characteristics of people that are more predisposed to in entrepreneurship. I would say obviously we need to have the skill, and this is what we are trying to build you and I. You must have technical skills, but also business skills. Technical skills, somebody mentioned here, you must be an electrical engineer. If you not to say that you must be an electrician to run an engineering business, but it helps immensely if you are an electrical engineer. But you need other business skills like strategic planning, organizational design, a lot of those things we spoke about leadership. Those are technical skills, but you must also have the right beliefs, right? Because you'll realize that entrepreneurs are almost like foolish in nature.
Irreverent.
Irreverent.
Yep.
I mean, you must have this. I've got a mentor. So just to digress. So one of my fundamental life operating system, it's ingrained within me. It's a fundamental belief. I believe that there's abundance, and that permeates in everything that I do in my life. I'll give you a typical example. Yep. Whenever I go to a mall to find parking, I don't park at the back. I always drive to the front because knowing there will be a parking available, which is, my mentor made me realize this, to say, this is such not a narcissistic belief, but a proud belief. Why would you drive? Obviously, sometimes I don't find parking, but I go like, oh, well, there's no parking today. But without fail, whenever I go to the mall, I'll always try to park next to the entrance. It does not matter the time of the day, but it's the attitude of abundance, right? And I'm saying we do need to interrogate. And I'm not saying, by the way, that's a good thing, because it's actually dangerous at some point. It wastes time and a lot of things. But we do need to also, as entrepreneurs, interrogate our belief system and try to manipulate and change it so that it fits the journey that we are on. So belief is fundamentally important. And I always argue all these other things that says personality characteristics. And I know a lot of people think beliefs and characteristics, those things are inborn within you, you can't change. I'm not of that school. I do believe you can challenge your beliefs and change them as you go. Right. Even characteristics, by the way. Characteristics, things like I'm not punctual on a day, I read and by the way, I've subscribed to this that says to change behavior, you need to practice it for a period of, it was not even that long, right? I think it was about 30 days. That if you tell yourself you're gonna wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you do it for 30 days, it becomes a habit. So things like habits as well, you can change them. If you want to be punctual, you want to read more, or you want to be more patient, or you want to have more endurance, or all those things I believe are available to us, and it's up to us to change them. But you have to actively try do them, and that's why there's theory in psychology, there's theory in philosophy, there's theory in entrepreneurship that will help us address issues of skills, beliefs, and characteristics. So one of the things I'm saying as an entrepreneur, you have to have the right beliefs, you have to have the right skills, you have to have the right characteristics, and those things, by the way, I do believe they are malleable. It's not easy, but you can change them. But it takes a conscious effort for us to be, one, you need to identify them and obviously work on changing.
There's a lot of questions you still have to answer, right? Because there's been a lot of questions that come through, but I want to take one more call.
Yeah.
But this says to me that we need to have conversation about what is an entrepreneur, what are the character traits of an entrepreneur. One of the things that you've talked about is the fundamental belief system of
spirituality, right?
Of an entrepreneur, because a lot of people are asking questions about, can you go to an organization to go and teach you how to be an entrepreneur? And maybe you can. But it appears to me that there is a particular or a fundamental worldview that a person who's entrepreneurial needs to have. Listen, I just quickly want to take this call from Teboho in Boksburg. Hi, Teboho. Go ahead.
Man, thank you so much.
Yes,
I'm very sorry. I caught your conversation halfway. Yeah. I'm driving actually halfway through to Joburg. Anyway, I just wanted to actually, with your guest over there, say something very profound, my brother. You can say, you know what, I started off from non-qualification whatsoever. I passed my matric many months ago, and I was exposed to the mining industry, and I saw a niche, and can say to you right now, my brother, I own a couple of businesses. I've got a farm that I've leased out of my pocket in the Free State. Yeah. I've got a club that I've done. I've got actually a couple of businesses that I'm doing with the mining industry. And for that matter, it has been a passion of mine. You can say, you know what? I was only given a learnership in terms of electronics, and I never looked back. I was exposed to the mining industry, and I was called at some point a entrepreneur. And I said to myself, let me use this as a stepping stone to can do other businesses, to can actually show other black brothers that black child, your dreams are valid. Yes, you might not go to varsity, whatever the case may be, but I'm passionate about business, my brother. I do a lot of businesses. I've got systems in place whereby now I can be anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Whereby now my businesses are running smoothly. I know everything that is happening in my businesses. And for that matter, I don't want to know what to call myself. An entrepreneur, or a businessman.
You might, hey Debza, you might be all of those things. Listen to me.
Here's something to you, my brother.
Yeah.
I love creating employment.
Yeah.
Yeah? And for me, it's something that it gives me that push. Can say what? If I can now develop this chain, and wherever I'm speaking, I preach this thing and say, guys, you just need to knock on all the doors. You don't need political affiliation, whatever it is. Maybe you don't need all the connections that as people believe that, you just need to believe in yourself, believe that from scratch, my brother. My friends I come from a very small town in Vicksburg. I grew up in Johannesburg. I used to be a gardener. I used to work in the garden. So now, I actually got in your conversation where you were talking to a guy that said, guys from prison started a gardening, whatever. I used to, from high school, my brother, go work at a guy that used to work as a commissioner for the construction.
I've got to stop you, my brother, because we've run out of time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Clearly, we've got to talk about the character traits of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There are a number of myths that we need to dispel around what it is, what an entrepreneur is, and then maybe we'll get to the point where we speak about the business. But what I'm coming out with this conversation is that you can be all of them.